It was just after 6:30 a.m. on a grey Melbourne morning. In the narrow back laneway of a quiet suburban street, a grey BMW sat parked at an awkward angle, the driver's door wide open. The engine was still running, its idle hum swallowed by the early morning mist. Detectives would later say the scene felt wrong from the moment they arrived. Too quiet, too still, like the air itself was holding its breath. On the cracked concrete beneath the open door, droplets of blood trace a short, dark trail toward the gutter. Inside, slumped against a seatbelt, was 36-year-old Athan Boursinos. His eyes were glazed, unseeing. His right hand hung limp toward the asphalt, car keys hooked loosely around his fingers. In the distance, the blue and red flashes of approaching police cars painted the fog in waves of color. The first responders didn't need to check for a pulse to know it was too late. Athan had been shot in what would soon be called a targeted, cold-blooded execution, a hit that would send shockwaves through Melbourne's criminal underworld. But this wasn't just another gangland murder. This was a killing with roots tangled deep in betrayal, revenge, and a chain of events that began with another name, one already infamous in the city's underworld, Sam the Punisher Abdulrahim. To understand Athan's fate, you need to understand the war he was walking into. Melbourne's underworld had been simmering with tension for years. After the bloody underworld wars of the early 2000s, the city's criminal networks had learned to operate in shadows, quieter, smarter, but no less dangerous. Athan Boursinos wasn't a household name to the public, but to police and the people who moved in the city's darker corners, he was known. Not as a kingpin, but as a facilitator, a man who knew people, connected dots, and sometimes crossed lines. Court records and police files, the kind normally seen only by detectives and lawyers, painted a picture of a man with a string of low-level charges, suspected links to outlaw motorcycle gangs, and, more recently, whispered connections to Abdulrahim. Abdulrahim was a heavyweight in the city's gangland, a feared enforcer whose nickname, the Punisher, wasn't earned by chance. His survival after a brutal 2019 shooting in an underground car park had only heightened his notoriety. And Athan? According to investigators, he'd been caught in the orbit of that violence. The theory was simple. In the shifting alliances of Melbourne's underworld, Athan had made an enemy of someone powerful enough to make him disappear. Flashback, Abdulrahim shooting. It was a dim June evening in 2019. Abdulrahim was leaving a private gym in an underground car park. CCTV footage showed him walking to his car, unaware of the two figures emerging from the shadows. They were fast, deliberate, their movements smooth, like men who had done this before. In the grainy footage, the muzzle flashes were brief but unmistakable, illuminating wet concrete as the shots rang out. Abdulrahim was hit multiple times, collapsing beside his vehicle. But against all odds, he survived. Police never officially confirmed the shooters' identities, but whispers in the underworld linked the attack to a feud involving several figures, Athan's name surfacing in more than one informant account. By early 2023, Athan's world was tightening. He'd been served with court documents outlining charges related to unrelated drug supply allegations. His appearance date was set. The summons sat on his kitchen counter, the clock ticking down to a hearing he seemed reluctant to face. Friends later told police Athan had been agitated, restless, in the weeks before his death. One described him as watching shadows, constantly checking mirrors, avoiding routines. If he knew something was coming, he didn't, or couldn't, stop it. Detective Inspector Dean Thomas, a seasoned homicide investigator, was first on scene that morning in the laneway. His eyes took in everything: the angle of the BMW, the open door, the scatter of shell casings. Forensic teams worked silently behind the police tape, photographing, bagging evidence, marking the positions of each casing with numbered yellow tents. From the start, it was clear this wasn't random. The shooter knew exactly where Athan would be and exactly how to get away. 3 hours later, 20 kilometers away, residents reported thick black smoke curling into the winter sky from an industrial estate. Fire crews found the charred skeleton of a sedan, its interior reduced to ash. Detectives quickly connected it to Athan's murder. Inside the wreck, they recovered fragments of melted plastic and twisted metal, possibly the remains of a firearm. Every scrap was bagged, logged, and sent to the lab. This was a classic gangland tactic: torch the getaway car to erase fingerprints, DNA, and ballistic evidence. Over the next week, detectives moved into Melbourne's underbelly, leaning on informants and contacts. The mood was tense. Nobody wanted to talk, not about Athan, and definitely not about Abdulrahim. In smoky back rooms and rain-slicked alleys, investigators pushed for leads. A few whispered hints suggested the hit had been ordered as payback, not just for debts or disrespect, but for information Athan might have shared with police. But rumors in the underworld are a currency of their own. Sorting truth from self-serving fiction was a job in itself. At the Homicide Squad surveillance hub, a wall of monitors glowed with looping CCTV footage. Traffic cameras, petrol station security feeds, street-level footage from the laneway. One clip showed Athan's BMW entering the area less than 10 minutes before the shooting. Another showed a dark sedan, possibly the burnt-out vehicle, leaving at high speed moments later. Mapping software drew red lines between locations linked to both Athan and Abdulrahim, plotting a web of movements that hinted at coordination. Then came the break, or what looked like one. A witness had seen a man in black clothing and a balaclava near the laneway shortly before the murder. In a stock interview room, they described the figure as tall, broad-shouldered, moving with purpose. But in cases like this, description meant little. A balaclava and dark clothes turned the killer into a ghost. Still, it was one more piece, another shadow to add to the puzzle. Acting on combined intelligence, police moved in on a Carlton address linked to a known associate of Abdulrahim. At dawn, tactical officers in black body armor breached the door, weapons drawn, flashlights slicing through the dark interior. They found weapons, cash, burner phones, but no assassin. Whoever had pulled the trigger on Athan had vanished, their trail scrubbed clean. Months later, the investigation led to charges against a man named John Harrison, a low-level criminal with suspected ties to the same network as Abdulrahim. Prosecutors claimed Harrison had acted as a driver in the hit, aiding the unidentified shooter. In court, the atmosphere was tense. Harrison sat in the dock in handcuffs, flanked by guards. The jury listened to grainy CCTV footage, phone records, and a parade of witnesses whose credibility was carefully picked apart by defense lawyers. When the verdict was read, Athan's family sat together, hands clasped tight. Harrison was found guilty of accessory to murder. The shooter, the person who had fired the bullets that ended Athan's life, was never formally identified in court. For Athan's loved ones, the conviction was hollow. The grief was raw, their tears mixing with the sterile air of the courtroom. Across the room, Harrison stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. At dusk, Melbourne's skyline glows gold and violet, the city's beauty masking the currents of violence that still run beneath. On a quiet street corner, a makeshift memorial marks the spot where Athan died. Candles flicker in the evening breeze. Photos of him, smiling, alive, are propped among bouquets of flowers. For the public, life moves on. For Athan's family, the questions remain. Who ordered the hit? Who pulled the trigger? And will they ever face justice?